So 2022 has been an insane year, but buckle up, guys, because 2023 is going to get even crazier. Now, just this year alone, we have seen groundbreaking events that has flipped the world economy on its head and is changing the world order. Now, the Western order is cracking, and we are starting to see the rise of the East. And as we all know, all this started off with the sanctions on Russia and the supply chain issues that are pushing the world into recession. And let's quickly recap the insanity that happened in 2022, right? We have seen Russian assets get frozen. Over $300 billion is now trapped in the West. That Saudi Arabia is breaking away from the West and they are heading towards Asia, specifically towards China and BRICS. Interest rates are now being used as financial weapons of destruction to remind the world that the US dollar is the reserve currency. It's really a beggar thy neighbor policy where the US economy shines because the rest of the world is crashing. And more importantly, we are seeing the world all rushing to gold, a safe store of value. Deglobalization is happening, guys, and central banks that stockpiling gold because currencies they're all collapsing. Now, 2022 is only the preview. The main event will likely happen in 2023, and the signs are very clear. Economic hell is coming, and it's thanks to the United States once again. American policy is about to push the world economy off a cliff, and this is the calm before the storm. Now, I want us to concentrate on these 6 events that we must watch. 6 things that are really in motion that are going to reset the world as we know it. And let's talk about the US Omnibus Bill first, the $1.7 trillion in funding. But more specifically, the provision of $45 billion for Ukraine and a 10% rise in defense spending. I think we need to realize that the war is an industry, right? And there are too many people getting rich for a chance at peace. You want to know the greatest performance of 2022? It's not gold, guys. It's not even the US dollar, but the defense industry. Stocks like Lockheed Martin are up by over 35%. They're probably going to go higher the longer the war drags on. And here's the thing. We have Putin saying that he's already ready for peace talks, mentioning how we are ready to negotiate with everyone involved about acceptable solutions. But that is up to them. We are not the ones refusing to negotiate, they are. But the US, they are calling Putin's call to end the war insincere, and they have made a critical statement that just reveals their intentions. And this is what they said. We have to see some meaningful evidence that Russia is prepared to actually negotiate a just and durable peace. And durable in the sense that we want to make sure it holds and that we are not simply putting Ukraine in a position where Russia is going to repeat what it did a month, 6 months, or a year later. And this tells us that Ukraine could be joining NATO in the near future, or at the very least, the US wants Russia completely out of the country. And this tells us that the war isn't going to end anytime soon, guys. Putin, he wants to consolidate and ratify his gains, while the US is unwilling to. And with Zelensky's December appeal to Congress, the money is going to keep flowing to Ukraine. And we're going to have another year of supply chain issues, higher energy prices, and more dangerous deficit spending. It's going to get worse. And we need to understand that this $45 billion to Ukraine is going to balloon the $31 trillion national debt of the United States even further. And this probably isn't the last check they're going to write for Ukraine. I smell more money coming. Now, obviously, the debt ceiling is going to be raised again. They are masters at kicking the can down the road, but sooner or later, the debt is going to become unsustainable. At over 4% interest rates today, the United States is going to enter a debt crisis and the dollar could be in deeper trouble in 2023. But if you think the Russia-Ukraine situation is bad, US-China tensions are about to escalate in 2023. The US State Department has launched a new dedicated unit called China House to counter Beijing's rise to power. And I think this is a clear sign that America is losing ground to China on the world stage and they're going to accelerate their economic sanctions on them. According to the US, the sheer scale, scope, and complexity and stakes of the China challenge requires us to think, collaborate, organize, and act differently. And China House is meant to try and checkmate China, right? Because in America's perspective, they are seeing the slow disintegration of the Western order. America's old alliances are starting to fracture. And if you think about it, if you're Joe Biden, right, Saudi Arabia gave Xi a grand welcome while you only receive a fist bump. Then you have Germany running to China, Olaf Scholz bringing Germany's top industry CEOs to Beijing to work closer together. That's really frightening. Plus now, China's fiercely de-dollarizing, dumping treasuries every single month to protect their assets and drive yields up, right, in America. And with China house, we can expect an escalation of economic tensions from the Biden administration. What we can expect in 2023 is further economic attack sanctions on China. If the US is losing the geopolitical battle, they are going to try their best to win the technology fight against China. Now, we already have the US preventing China from advancing their chip making technology. And what's interesting is now they have convinced Japan and Netherlands to join in with the chip sanctions on China in this tech cold war, right? Now, China, they can't buy advanced semiconductor chips on Japan or the Netherlands, and this could spread to other US allies very soon. This is economic warfare, and we're going to see China counter this move. They're about to pump a trillion yuan or $140 billion to develop their own chip making industry as a response, right? And in the short term, this will cost China quite a bit, but in the long term, they could actually pull out ahead with a win. And what we are seeing is deglobalization on an epic scale, where America is pushing for friendshoring and decoupling from China. They're going to try to get their supply chains centered around their allies like Japan and South Korea. We can expect China to also break away from the US financially by dumping even more treasuries. They're going to make the process even harder. It doesn't make sense for China to continue funding the US own efforts to undermine themselves, right? And in 2023, we can expect China to push for further deglobalization, further de-dollarization around the world, especially in the Middle East. Now, this is a big one because it involves the petrodollar system. Now, when I mention this, there's a lot of confusion, right? I get a lot of pushback saying that America no longer imports much oil from the Middle East anymore, and that's absolutely true. Most of America's oil imports are from Canada, but the real concern here is the petrodollar recycling. Today, OPEC still sells their oil in dollars, and they use that huge stack of revenue to recycle it back into US treasuries. We need to understand this. This keeps bond values up and yields low. It makes America's borrowing costs very low. And this is very critical because we're already seeing many countries de-dollarizing and dumping their treasuries. Now, China is obviously dumping, and Japan is also selling off their US bonds. So, if Saudi Arabia and the Middle East breaks the petrodollar arrangement, we will see even less money flow into treasuries. And this is going to jack up borrowing costs for the United States and push it one step closer towards a recession or a bond crisis. And this is what could happen in 2023. So what we have now is China using their economic leverage with Saudi Arabia being China's top oil supplier. They also signed a 27-year LNG deal with Qatar, and this tells us the level of partnership China is building with the Middle East. And more importantly, China is pushing the Gulf nations to use the Shanghai Petroleum and Natural Gas Exchange to settle energy trade in yuan, and this could very well happen in 2023. Saudi relations with the US at an all-time low, and partnership with China is accelerating, right? And if the petrodollar system breaks, this will be a game changer. It will be a net negative for the dollar. And it's not that the Chinese yuan is suddenly going to replace the dollar, that's not going to happen. But how the US bonds are becoming less attractive going forward into the future. If there are fewer oil contracts priced in dollars, there will be obviously fewer dollars circulating around that will flow into US treasuries. It's death by a thousand cuts. And this is a clear and present danger for the United States and a real escalation point. But a big shout out to our sponsor today, Private Internet Access. Now, we all know the importance of keeping some money outside of the banking system, right? Especially in gold. We want privacy for our wealth, and you should be treating your data the same way. Online browsing isn't as safe as it used to be, with all types of hackers and scams out there. You need to be protected. You don't want your identity stolen and any of your financial accounts compromised, right? And this is why having a VPN is just so useful. It keeps your data and activity confidential away from the hackers. And the great thing is that PIA is completely web-based. You can download it on your phone through their app or to your desktop and get started. In fact, you can use it for up to 10 devices at a time, including your phone, desktop, and tablet. Now, PIA has world-class servers that cover over 83 countries, including each and every state in the US. And if I'm accessing my trading and stock market accounts, I want to make sure that no one's watching me and that my details are completely private, right? And you can get started with PIA and get an 83% discount using the link in the description below. Plus, you also enjoy 4 months for free for just being an awesome subscriber to this channel. So check them out now and get protected today. The fourth threat in 2023 is Russia's response to the oil price cap. Now, the G7, they have slapped Putin with a price cap of $60 to try and drain Russian revenues, but still keep Russian oil flowing to the country. It's really a bipolar sanction that isn't working. Russia's still selling their crude oil to Asia above the price cap. They are using their own fleet of tankers and insurance firms to bypass the G7 sanctions, right? But here's the interesting part. The price of oil has rebounded sharply since the price cap started on the 5th of December, right? Brent crude has climbed from a low of $76 to almost $84 in less than a month. And what we have is Russia moving to slash their oil output by up to 7%, right? We are talking about 700,000 barrels a day, and that's a significant amount of oil that's going to be taken out of the global markets. But here's the thing, Asian countries like China and India won't be affected because they're already discount buyers of Russian oil. India is reportedly buying oil below the price caps, and they're about to extend their oil contracts with Russia. And this means energy prices are going to soar exclusively for the West and the G7 countries, right? Not only is Russia going to ban selling oil to countries that join the price cap, but now they might restrict oil production further to the world. So we're going to have two oil markets in the world, right? One where Russian oil flows freely and certain countries can buy crude oil at huge discounts, and another where oil prices are just jacked up. And here's the wild card. If OPEC joins Russia to cut production further, we could see energy inflation stay high, and this could push the Federal Reserve to keep higher rates until we enter a recession. Which brings us to the fifth horseman of the apocalypse, Jerome Powell and his rate hikes. I think by now we know the deal. Powell is going to stick to the script and is going to keep at it until the economy crashes, and according to Fed projections, we are looking at 5.1% in 2023. Now remember that the Fed has gone from near zero to 4.5% in less than a year, and it's amazing, right? The economy is still standing. But this is what the Federal Reserve is looking at. They are looking at the superficial metrics of the economy, the heavily massaged numbers that don't really make any sense. They are ignoring the reality that disinflation is already happening, and the Fed could very well over-tighten and crash the markets. So let's understand the impossible situation Powell has sandwiched himself into. He is facing a credibility crisis, and he has pegged 2% inflation as the holy grail target, right? But the big problem is that inflation today is more of a supply side issue than a demand side problem, right? We can see the Federal Reserve sucking away tons of liquidity in the market by selling away almost $400 billion worth of bonds from their balance sheet in 2022. And now that rates are going up, this is going to make borrowing much harder and going to trap liquidity away from the markets, away from the economy. And let's just sit back and think about this rationally. If you're the average Joe, it doesn't make sense to plow your money into the stock market or to go on a spending spree when you can get 3 to 4% risk-free in a savings account. And if you're a bank, the brain dead strategy to stay afloat is to park your money with the Fed in their reverse repo facility that's paying almost 4% yield, 0% lending risk, and guaranteed returns courtesy of the Federal Reserve. And all this is trapping liquidity away from the economy. Lines of credit, they are becoming more expensive, and people are fearful for their immediate future. What we have is a horrible yield curve inversion staring us in the face. We can see the 6-month treasury is yielding 4.6%, while the 10 years at a ridiculous 3.7%, well below even the Fed funds rate. And this tells us that investors, they are piling cash into long-term bonds because they are anticipating a market crash, and the Federal Reserve pivoting by lowering rates in the near future. But it's not just the US bond market that's in trouble. We have a global yield curve inversion happening. The fears are building because central banks all over the world, they are all tightening, and the first domino to fall could very well be the United States. And let's remember what Powell is really tracking, right? His dual mandate of stable prices and maximum employment. He's looking only at the inflation numbers and the unemployment rate. And right now, inflation is at 7.1%, and that is still above interest rates, which is bad news for the Fed. It tells the public that the Federal Reserve, they have lost control, and Powell has to tighten further to save his credibility. And if we look at the unemployment rate, it is still near all-time lows at 3.7%, and even Janet Yellen is telling everyone that 4% unemployment is still healthy. And this gives the Fed perfect cover for their rate hikes because now the economy is still strong and it's still robust, right? You can't make this stuff up. And they still have the wiggle room to raise rates even further. So it's very likely that Powell will over tighten in 2023 and trigger a recession. It is unlikely that a pivot will happen until the economy is on fire. So hang on tight, guys. And in 2022, this is the big one. We saw central banks all over the world rush to gold. In fact, the first 3 quarters this year have seen record amounts of gold being stockpiled away. But if this one event happens in 2023, we're going to see another massive rush to gold regardless of the price. And this is if the EU manages to successfully confiscate Russia's assets and give them to Ukraine. Now, if you didn't know by now, between the United States and the EU, the West, Russia has around $300 billion of assets frozen. But what the EU is trying to do is unprecedented. They are trying to confiscate a sovereign country's wealth, and whether you agree with this or not, it will open up Pandora's box. But here's the thing, I believe the EU will likely succeed. The money is already in limbo and it's just a matter of time. And if we look at Russia's foreign reserves, we can see a ton of money in the G7 countries are trapped under sanctions, around $300 billion worth. But take a look at the number one asset that can't be sanctioned away. Russia has over $130 billion in gold that they have access to. And if the EU's confiscation really does go through, we're going to see central banks, especially China and India, start to stockpile more gold. They're going to divert wealth away from the West, which likely means selling off US and EU bonds and storing their money in physical gold. They're going to sell dollars to buy gold. Now, a larger percentage of their reserves are going to sit in gold because it's the only asset that has zero counterparty risk. So if you believe the gold price is high now, you have no idea how it will explode up if this black swan event comes true, right? The dollarization is going to reach a fever pitch and a big scramble for gold might happen. And many people aren't really aware of this confiscation attempt, and this is going to come out of left field and shock the world, right? Everyone's going to be suddenly shocked once again. And that's why I'm still averaging into gold month after month and well into 2023, because not only is inflation a problem, but now we have the unthinkable about to happen. So 2023 isn't going to be a smooth year, guys. I wish I could say we are leaving the pain behind, but things aren't looking good. We are on the brink of entering stagflation, where recession is going to crash headlong into high inflation. And I believe sometime next year, the Fed will realize that they can't reach their 2% inflation target anymore, and they'll try to convince everyone that 3 or 4% is the new normal. And in 2023, it is also very likely something groundbreaking will happen and change the world forever. Maybe it's the Saudis breaking away from the petrodollar arrangement. Maybe it's the EU really confiscating Russian assets. But I want us to be prepared to the point that if it does happen, we know how to react, right? We won't be paralyzed and can immediately take action to protect ourselves. So let me know what you think in the comments below. How bad will 2023 get? And are you well prepared for more chaos ahead? And let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, Merry Christmas, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.